Hey guys, welcome back to another video. I know this is the first time you're hearing my voice since December, but I just haven't really been enjoying making videos anymore. But I had an idea. If you don't know me, I'm a huge film buff, and I know I haven't really talked about movies on this channel, but I love movies. Old movies, new movies, black and white, silent, you name it. I love movies. But there are a few movies that I just think deserve more credit than they really get, and should get more attention, and I just wanted to talk about them in this video. Keep in mind, this is entirely my opinion. This is not the 5 definitive most underrated movies. These are just the 5 that I wish would get a little more attention. Alright, at the number 5 spot, I'm gonna have the Towering Inferno. Now, you've probably never heard of most of these movies, and that's why I think they're underrated, is because you haven't heard of them. But this is a great movie. It has Steve McQueen, and if you don't know who that is, he was a pretty popular actor of, like, the 60s, late 50s, and 70s. And I know The Great Escape is his most famous movie, and I love The Great Escape, but this one's always been my favorite. Now, I own, like, a ton of copies of this movie, and my dad loves this movie, so he told me to check it out. I did, and I loved it. It's basically a movie where there's a giant party going on in like a 80-story building, and the party's on the top floor, and like in the middle of the building there's a fire, and the fire just slowly spreads across the building, causing complete havoc. It's about 3 hours, and it's 3 hours of fun. It's just a fun 70s action movie with likable characters and in realistic scenarios that you want them to get out of. The reason this is underrated, though, is because barely anyone talks about it. Now, I love the 70s. I think the 70s are, like, the best decade for movies. You had movies like The Godfather, Star Wars, and many more. But this one has always been one of my favorite of the 70s. It's not my favorite, I mean, but it definitely is underrated and deserves a lot more credit. Alright, at number 4, I'm gonna have a movie from 1965 called The Flight of the Phoenix. Now, this is a movie where an airplane full of, like, I don't know, 12 men crash into the desert in the middle of, like, Saudi Arabia. And, like, they start building a plane to survive. Now, these men, like, basically hate each other's guts and are constantly bickering and fighting each other on how to build the plane, what to do, where to go, who's in charge, and all that stuff. And they have to build a plane to get out, and eventually they do. So it's a really fun movie. It's about 2.5 hours, and it's very stressful too, as like time runs out, and especially at the end, like when the plane's built. There's like I won't spoil anything in case you want to see the movie, but there's a very stressful scene where the plane's trying to take off. But the reason this is underrated is basically for the same reason as Towering Inferno. Not many people know about this movie or talk about it, and again, a movie that I wouldn't have watched unless it was for my dad recommending it to me. Now, I haven't seen the 2004 remake, and I probably won't because it doesn't look very good, but this one's great, and I think this one should get more attention and should be talked about more. People like all these 60s, like, fun action movies or, like, just I don't know, popcorn flicks. Well, this should be one that should be talked about more too. Alright, so at number 3, I'm gonna have a movie called Stalag 17. What is Stalag 17? Well, it's a movie with a bunch of with a bunch of American soldiers in a Nazi prison camp. Now, this whole movie is about them trying to find a way to escape, and the main character, who's also played by the same guy who is in Sunset Boulevard, um, he's basically trying to lead this operation of how they escape, like tunneling out, but also at the same time he realizes there's a traitor in their camp who's giving intel to a Nazi soldier, and he's at the same time he's trying to find this soldier, and he's trying to help them escape everyone else in his camp. But so this is a very fun 2-hour movie. It's very comedic too. There's a lot of funny stuff in it. And everyone has different personalities, and at least very memorable characters, memorable scenes, memorable moments. The whole movie's fun, and I love it. Again, basically all these movies I wouldn't have known of if it wasn't for my dad, like, discovering them on his own. But, I recommend checking these out, and this one is definitely the funniest one on this list. Alright, so at the number 2 spot, I'm gonna have a movie called Dark Star. Now, this in the number 1 spot, I'm gonna basically guarantee you've never heard of it, let alone seen it. But this is actually quite a funny movie. I think it's a space comedy. It feels like a knockoff version of 2001: A Space Odyssey. So I was 11, so about 3 years ago when I first saw this movie, and back then I was like thinking this was a really boring and weird and dumb movie that I never wanted to see again. But, like, I rewatched it recently because I was looking through all the Blu-rays to find something to watch, and I was like, oh yeah, that's Dark Star. I haven't seen Dark Star in a long time, and upon rewatching it, I really enjoyed it, and I love it. I think it's very underrated. It had a budget of under $20,000, which is not much money at all. That's very cheap. It's very weird. There's like a beach ball with feet, but yeah, it's a pretty good comedy that I can't even explain the plot because I don't even know if there is one. But yeah, I recommend you watch it. And my number one for the most underrated movie of all time is Gangadin. This is one of my favorite movies of the 1930s and one of my favorite movies of all time. I virtually love everything about this movie. I love the characters, the plot, and actually its inspiration. A lot of people might not know this, but I'm guessing a lot of you know what Indiana Jones is. Well, this movie was a huge inspiration for the Temple of Doom. And I don't think Spielberg ever mentioned it when he talks about the movie, but this really does feel like an early 1930s Temple of Doom. It's just black and white and not as violent or dark. But like this movie, I believe, has currently under 10,000 votes on IMDb. Under 10,000. You know how many? That's barely anyone. Considering how many users are on IMDb, that's barely anyone. This movie is virtually invisible to the public eye. Most people don't know this movie exists, and I wish people did. I wish people would recognize this movie, and it frustrates me knowing how obscure this movie is. I love this movie. I love, as I said, everything about it. And that is my number one pick for the most underrated movies of all time. If you haven't seen Gangadin, please check it out. Well, there you have it. Those are my top 5 picks for the most underrated movies of all time. Of course, this is only my opinion, and do I think these movies are Citizen Kane level of perfect? No. Let alone, I don't even think any of them are perfect. I think they're all with their flaws, but we're not here to criticize. I think these movies are just underrated and should get more love and should be talked about more. I think these movies are overlooked, and a lot of people, the vast majority, probably doesn't know about them, especially Gangadin and Dark Star. Of course, if you have any underrated movies that you think should have been on this list, let me know in the comments down below, and I might check them out. And if you like these movie-styled videos, because I definitely like them way more. I'm more passionate about movies and video games than I am. No, I mean, movies than I am about video games and Legos, because this is something I've wanted to do on the channel for a long time. I wanted to change it because video games and Lego reviews just really aren't my cup of tea. But let me know movies you think should be on this list in the comments below. I might check them out, and I will see you guys in the next video.